All right, so last class we started talking about stages of cognitive development. Talked about the sensory motor stage, is where babies learn through motor movements and how it affects sensation. And sorry, I was late. I had to try. You're fine. How it affects sensation. Main things in sensory motor is they don't have object permanence until about 8 months or so. All right, and then they start to slowly develop it. And then also around that time, they start to develop stranger anxiety, about a year to 2 years, because they've started to walk. Um, they now understand that when their parent goes away, that they still exist, and their schemas for faces are not fully developed yet. So they're not good at like recognizing people that they don't know. Right. And then the next stage from about age 2 to 6 is the pre-operational stage. Pre-operational, main thing, they can start to pretend play. They start to use symbolic language, and they are egocentric until about the age of 5, meaning they don't understand that other people lives exist beyond theirs. Like they think that everybody sees the same thing that they see. Around age 5, they start to develop what's called theory of mind, which is understanding that other people have internal lives and have feelings and whatnot. And then the other main thing is they don't understand conservation, which means even if the shape of something changes, they don't understand that the mass of it has not changed. Okay? So once they start to understand the principles of conservation, that is when they move into what is called concrete operations. Right? Concrete operations is where they can learn, sorry, where they learn to think logically about things that are real or concrete. They can think like, oh, if this happens, then this. If A, then B. If I don't turn in my vocabulary, then I will get a bad grade. That's logic, okay? That makes sense to them. They cannot think abstractly at this point, meaning they can't think about things that don't exist. They can't really think about hypothetical situations. They are very sort of black and white with stuff. Um, they can start manipulating things with their mind, though. So, for instance, like they can start. What type of math are kids doing? Start at age 6, 7, or so. Mostly addition and subtraction, all right? Because they can understand addition and subtraction because of the symbols, but they are not going to be able to really understand until like 9, 10-ish, like multiplication. They won't necessarily understand because they'll see that and say, why is there a letter in the middle of that, in the middle of that? Okay. So they won't understand that at first, but they will slowly start to. Um, and if you think about what type of like math problems do you do at this age? Not just addition and subtraction, like what's the style of problem that they give you a lot of the time? Word problems, yeah. If Jeff has 75 cucumbers and Mary has 36 pumpkins and they need to exchange, because that's something tangible. They might even have like manipulatives to go with it. It's something concrete that they can think about. The other thing that they can start to do is categorize and put things into multiple categories. So before this, if you have a red ball and you say, what are the different categories this will go into? kids would be like, well, it's either a ball or it's red, but it can't be both. All right, now they can put it in the category of red, and they can put it in the category of ball. All right, they can split the two because they have what's called two-dimensional thinking at this stage. All right, that is all you need to know about concrete operations. Then finally, around the age of 12, actually probably before that, but so Piaget says that the last stage goes from 12 on, meaning it goes throughout your entire life. And that's because in this last stage, we're just continuously kind of building on it. This is what's called formal operations. Now, not every adult reaches this stage. Not every adult is able to think in formal operations. If you want any proof of that, just go on Facebook and you'll see. Okay, especially like right now with because one of the big things with formal operations is abstract reasoning, meaning thinking about things that are not real and things like being able to see like two sides of an argument. And if you go onto Facebook, there are people posting some really just insane things, and you're like, and if you feel like this is crazy, and they're like, no, it's not. This is completely reasonable, and they can't even see the other side of it. Right. So abstract reasoning is the big thing in this. You can start to find flaws in arguments. So when like people will really start to understand sarcasm, like understand what's called non-literal language. Again, some people never understand sarcasm, and I'm sure I can be very confusing sometimes to those people. But we can start like doing hypothesis testing, trial and error, and even like going through trial and error scenarios that aren't real, like imagining scenarios in their mind. Um, Long-term planning, things like that. And then metacognition. Does anybody know what metacognition is? Thinking about thinking. So, what anybody do you know like what an example of that is? Yeah, like philosophy is metacognition. Like if I were to ask you like if you come to a conclusion about something, and then I ask you, can you explain your thought process to me? Um, Psychology is a little bit of metacognition, yeah, because we are looking into how we think a lot of the time. This class in general is very much formal operations, right? Like this class is very abstract, which is why a like some people get this stuff like really easily. Like for some people, like this stuff just makes sense, right? But for some people who take this class, it never makes sense. Like they just can't grasp any of the stuff beyond like the hypothalamus is this thing because it's a tangible thing. But talking about like the mind is not tangible. That's why, so we said like in formal operations, we kind of have to learn how to do it. We get better and better as we get older, as long as you make it into that stage. Um, but that's why we do like the real life examples and stuff like that, because it makes something that is very abstract more tangible. And so it makes it easier to understand. All right, so that is formal operations. Anybody have any questions about that? All right, so last thing with Piaget, almost done with cognition, with cognitive development. Criticisms. Main criticism is that Piaget probably underestimated kids' abilities. The ages that he put with them are probably lowballing it. Like some kids start developing formal thought, um, like formal operational thought, age 9, 10. Like when do you start learning how to do algebra? I don't remember. Like doing like easy algebra, like 7x plus 3 equals 4. Okay. When do you start doing that? Like fifth grade, sixth grade? Six. Okay. So how old are you in sixth grade? Like 10, 11? Yeah. Okay. That's like formal operational thought. Um, so what they kind of agree on, what most psychologists agree on now is that Piaget has the order correct. Like he has like cognitive development going in the right order, but the ages probably aren't right. Like one of the things they say now is that object permanence probably develops earlier than 8 months. Like by like 5 or 6 months, most kids have started to develop it. And then the main criticism, what just the main criticism of stage theory in general, and of all the stage theorists, is that it's too rigid, and that how we learn is probably a little bit more gradual, and it's a little bit more fluid. So, going off of those criticisms, at the same time as Piaget, there is a contemporary of his in Russia that is also doing research on cognitive development. But he goes about it in a different way. And this guy's name is Lev Vygotsky. Lev Vygotsky, where Piaget says that cognitive development is maturational, meaning it's mostly based off of nature. It's mostly based off of just our biology. Um, Vygotsky emphasizes the role of the environment in cognitive development, and he doesn't have stages. Right? What he basically says is that our cognitive development is very much dependent upon the assistance that we get from somebody on a higher level than us. So basically, to develop cognitive abilities, we get help or what is called scaffolding from people that are at a higher cognitive level. So like teachers help develop these cognitive abilities. And so what he said was that basically our cognitive development falls into three concentric circles. In the middle, we have what we can do on our own. So let's use math, for example, right? All of you all can do algebra, basic algebra on your own, right? So that falls into that middle right there. Outside of the middle, we have what we can do with help. So, most of y'all are probably in like math 3 right now. So, you're learning math 3. You can do it, but you might need help from Engel or Haruska or Cueto or whoever your math 3 teacher is. This circle right here, what we can do with help is what is called the zone of proximal development. Basically, the zone of the proximity of where we have developed to. Okay, what we can do with help is the ZPD, zone of proximal development. Outside of that, we have what we can't do. So, like most of y'all probably can't do pre-calc right now. So, that's what you can't do. But once you take math 3, where is math 3 going to fall within those circles after you're done with it? Hmm? Math 3 is in your zone of proximal development. Now, once you're done with it, then where is math 3 going to go? What you can do. All right. So, yeah, things go from what you can do with help to what you can do. And then what you can't do starts to become what you can do with help. So, it says that our zone of proximal development is just always changing. All right. And we basically we just keep adding stuff into what we can do and then adding stuff into what we can do with help. And you can see how the environment that you're in plays a big role in that. All right. So, anybody have any questions of Lev Vygotsky's sociocultural theory of cognitive development? No. All right. I think it's a pretty easy concept. Both of these theories are correct. Like that's what you'll see in this class. Like pretty much all the stuff. Like there's stuff that's right in all these theories. It's probably a mixture of both. We develop in a certain order, but how quickly and how well each one develops depends a lot on our environment. All right. And even Piaget agreed with this in terms of formal operations. All right. Now we are moving on. There is a new PowerPoint. It is called Unit 5, Day 3, Attachment and Parenting Styles. And as I said, I think that this stuff is a lot more interesting. I like Vygotsky. So, in terms of us developing into healthy adults, there's really nothing more important than the environment that we are in as we are developing. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about for now. We're going to talk about attachment, parenting styles, and then next class we'll get to those, and we'll talk about Erikson and psychosocial development. And in terms of this social development, there is almost nothing that is more important here than our attachment with a caregiver. The attachment that we have, it should say strong bond, not strong bong with a caregiver. We shouldn't be doing it at that age, at least. Okay, and the strong bond with a caregiver that we have, especially at a very young age, meaning when we are a baby. This attachment is one of the most important factors in healthy childhood development. So, one of the things that they found is that how a baby displays stranger anxiety tells them a lot about their attachment with their parent. And we'll talk more about this next class. But, like babies that when the parent leaves, if they start crying, but then when the parent comes back, they are easily consoled, that tells us that they have a healthy attachment. But if the baby either doesn't cry or like cries like crazy, that tells us that maybe their attachment with their parent is not quite as healthy. And there are two major factors in forming attachment: body contact and familiarity with the caregiver. And we're going to talk about body contact today. And we're going to get into, as I said, a very unethical study that was done, but very important. So before we get into body contact, so as we develop, especially in early childhood, we have basically certain windows during development where we need to meet certain expectations. In animals, these are called critical periods. In humans, these are called sensitive periods. But the term you need to know is critical periods. Because like with animals, it's more rigid. With us, it's not quite as rigid. But for instance, like baby ducks need to form an attachment with their caregiver within like the first 17 hours of birth. And if they don't, then they basically won't be able to after that. Essentially, these critical periods are these use it or lose it periods of development. So, for instance, like they have found that we have to start developing language by about the age of 3. If we start developing it after that, like it becomes a lot harder to develop even our first language after the age of 3, because our brain starts pruning away those neural connections. And that's what we saw like with Jeannie, the girl who was locked in the room for 10 years. So we have these critical periods of, or sensitive periods of development. And one of the main ones is for forming attachment and getting body contact at a young age. When that's there's a reason why, like first thing when you come out of the womb, like first thing is mother holds you, right? Because you're forming that attachment right away. Now, this was not known until about the 1950s. Um, in the 1950s, at University of Wisconsin, there was a psychologist named Harry Harlow who was doing research on how rhesus monkeys learn. And he had all these baby rhesus monkeys that he had taken from their mothers, and he was doing all these experiments with them. And all of the rhesus monkeys had a terry cloth blanket. And one day there was a monkey that they had to take the blanket from the monkey because the monkey had pooped on it and they had to wash it. And when they took the blanket from the monkey, they observed that the monkey went, for no better of a term, went ape shit, okay, from when they took the blanket from them. And they looked at it and said, why is this monkey like going so crazy? So they started doing research on this. Um, really up until the 1950s, the prevailing thought about how parents should treat their children is that it should be a little bit more like a business relationship. And like they told parents, like, don't show your child too much love and affection because then they're going to be wimpy. Right. But, and also up until this point, the belief about attachment, they believe that babies formed attachment with the mother because of nourishment. They thought that the attachment was formed because the baby would get food from the mother. So what they did was, they had all these orphaned rhesus monkeys, and that's one of the really sort of unethical things with this study is, monkeys are very similar to humans, and taking a baby monkey from their mother has kind of the same effect as taking a human baby from their mother. So what they did was they raised some of these monkeys in complete isolation, meaning just by themselves, to see what effect that had. Spoiler, it effed them up really bad. Okay. All right. But then some of them they raised with two different mothers, with a wire mother that had food and a cloth mother that did not have food but had comfort. Okay. And they wanted to see which one the baby monkey would spend the most time with. And what do you think they found? Which one do you think they spent the most time with? Anyone? You have a 50, there's a 50-50 guess. And is anybody there? Cloth. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Overwhelmingly, they spent the most amount of time with the cloth mother, which surprised them. It went against what the prevailing thought of the time was that nourishment was the most important thing. They called this contact comfort, that we get comfort from touch. Touch is massively important to us forming relationships with our caregivers and us forming relationships with other people as well. So, we're going to watch a clip. You're going to see this in action. They filmed a lot of this. And then next class, we'll actually watch another one that is, you're going to see what happens with the ones that were raised like entirely in isolation. All right, so here is Harlow and his monkeys. Really, make sure you know, guys, the question you would get asked is, Harry Harlow found that it was what factor contributed the most to attachment? The answer would be comfort, or would be contact comfort, touch. All right, so here you're going to see. So one of the other things that they found, what was that they found that they would that we use when we have a secure attachment. Okay, yes, I know. Okay, when they have secure attachment, they've found that like babies will use the caregiver as a secure base for exploration. Like basically, it makes them more brave when they have the caregiver there. So that's what you're going to see in these next two clips. All right, so there you go, guys. So Harlow's research found that touch and comfort is sort of the most important factor when it comes to attachment. Anybody got any questions about any of that? All right, so for asynchronous, I just made another. I made another little 10-question multiple choice thing on cognitive development and then attachment. There, it's basically just what we've covered yet last class and today. There is one question that we have not gone over yet, but it's the information about it is on this slide, the Mary Ainsworth slide, and you should be able to figure out the answer to it just by looking at this slide. We're going to go over it next class, but let's put one of the questions on there. So you have unlimited attempts on this, like on the last one. The only difference is it's timed. So I gave you 7 minutes for 10 questions. But you have unlimited attempts to do it. All right, shouldn't be too bad. And so you have unlimited attempts to get 100. All right, so anybody got any questions about any